The nations of the United States of America and Mexico have a long history interacting with one another. Their relationship has been heavily influenced by the large Mexican-American minority living in the United States. Although many Mexicans have immigrated into the U.S. in more recent times, a significant portion of this group has resided on their current land since before it became part of the U.S. Much of what is now the American Southwest was controlled by Mexico until 1848, when it was lost in the Mexican-American War. Many Mexicans continued to live there, and their descendants still make up much of the local population to this day. The Mexican-American War was mainly caused by the annexation of Texas by the United States. The Republic of Texas had declared independence from Mexico, but the Mexican government refused to officially recognize their sovereignty. When the United States annexed Texas in 1845, it was viewed by Mexico as a provocation. President James K. Polk ordered American troops to enter disputed territory south of what Mexico considered the borders of Texas. They were eventually attacked by Mexican troops. To Mexico, this was viewed as an invasion, while the Americans saw it as protecting Texas. During the war, the Americans had the goal of conquering the territories of California and New Mexico, as well as capturing Mexico City. American forces led by General Zachary Taylor successfully took over northern Mexico, though there was some local resistance. California was taken with help from American settlers who staged a revolt against the Mexican government. General Winfield Scott was assigned to lead an army into the Mexican heartland. They captured Veracruz in 1847, and Mexico City fell in September. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed in 1848, and the United States purchased most of the modern-day American Southwest for $15 million. The war was not uncontroversial in the United States. The war was supported most fiercely by Southern Democrats who wanted to expand the institution of slavery. Many abolitionists in the North feared that the annexation of Texas and other Mexican territories would upset the balance of power between free and slave states. This upset would eventually go on to play a major role in causing the American Civil War. Additionally, many Americans supported the war due to anti-Catholic sentiment, which was common at the time in the heavily Protestant nation. Another large motivator for the war was the idea of manifest destiny, which was the idea that the United States had a right to spread across the continent. President James K. Polk, elected in 1844, was a major proponent of this concept. He purchased the Oregon Territory from Britain in 1846, officially extending the U.S. to the Pacific Ocean. He also tried to purchase northern Mexico prior to the war, but his request was denied. Polk and many of his political allies supported annexing Mexico entirely after the war, but many opposed this idea because they feared acquiring a large non-white population. Mexico's defeat resulted in the loss of half of their territory, a major blow to the nation's prestige. Many Mexicans blamed General and Mexican President Santa Anna for the failure. Santa Anna was viewed by many Mexicans as a corrupt leader. They believed he selfishly gave independence to Texas after he was captured so that he could have his freedom. Many also believed that he was needlessly bloodthirsty when he had nearly all Texan rebels killed at the Alamo after their surrender. Santa Anna was tasked with defending Mexico from the U.S., and it was suspected that the Americans had bribed him to intentionally lose the war. In 1853, Santa Anna personally profited off of the further purchase of Mexican land by the U.S., which helped him finance his rule over Mexico when he served as president. As a condition of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, all Mexicans living in the American Southwest at the time of the annexation and their descendants were officially classified by the U.S. government as white. For this reason, Mexican Americans did not experience the same government-enforced segregation policies implemented against other minority groups such as African Americans. However, there was still de facto segregation, with discrimination against Mexicans by white Americans not being uncommon. Mexicans were also often blamed for economic hardship, with many Mexicans being forcefully deported during the Great Depression. Oftentimes, Mexican Americans and their communities would assimilate into the larger American culture in order to obtain civil rights. Around 400,000 Mexican Americans served in the United States Armed Forces during the Second World War. Upon returning home in 1945, many of these men were hailed as heroes in their hometowns, yet still treated as second-class citizens. These men who had fought against tyrannical regimes abroad were not willing to tolerate this unequal treatment they were subject to in the country which they had fought for. Civil rights groups concerned with the treatment of Mexican Americans began to greatly increase in popularity and influence, with many veterans helping spearhead these movements. The ongoing presence of discrimination against Mexican Americans led to the rise of the Chicano movement in the late 1960s. The Chicano movement sought to abandon efforts to assimilate and embrace their ethnic roots. The movement initially took off by fighting for the rights of Mexican farm workers. They also worked to reclaim lands that were guaranteed to Mexicans after the Mexican-American War that were unfairly confiscated. The movement was successful and allowed for many reforms to take place, which allowed Mexican Americans to have equal rights while maintaining their unique cultural identity. Historically, the relationship between Mexico and the United States has had its hurdles, with the most prominent of these rocky periods being the Mexican-American War. The annexation of lands by the United States led to the native Mexican residents oftentimes facing hardship and discrimination. Today, the Mexican-American community is vibrant and influential. They have had a major impact on various aspects of American culture, and many Mexican Americans have been elected to positions of political power, ranging from the United States Congress to city councils.